Hello, everyone. I'm really looking forward to our party, which is just around the corner. And I've come back to you today wanting to answer more of your questions. I'm getting to the place where I'm needing to triage what I think are the most important questions. And so today I would like to talk about giftedness. And the questions that I'm trying to answer today include, does labeling a child as gifted affect their mindset? Do gifted students benefit from inquiry-based learning in the same way non-gifted students benefit? Would this practice, from a research perspective, be done as a whole class, or would teaching be adapted to gifted students? And then the third is, do gifted students struggle with self-regulation? What do brain breaks look like for gifted students? And those are all very, very good questions. So not me, only, but we as a field know that gifted children have unique needs. I think one of the most important unique need is the understanding that their own emotional maturity is less than their cognitive capacity to understand the world around them. So as adults, we have had a lifetime of opportunity to establish coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms. We can compartmentalize things to be able to survive in the world, to process everything that's going on around us, to read the news and not break down in tears, right? Like we've developed those capacities. Children, however, haven't. So they don't have the same life experience that has allowed them to create those defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms. And so therefore, the world around them, which they can comprehend in a way that goes beyond their years, tends to hit them like to the quick of their heart. And gifted children experience a great deal of anxiety generally because of that. The other thing that happens for gifted children is that they struggle to find kindred spirits. Like, to be gifted, you're in the 1 or 2 top percentile of your age range in terms of cognitive functioning, which means out of 100 children, there would only be, maybe one other like you. And so finding kindred spirits can be very difficult. I once had this child that I was working with back in the days when I used to do frontline work. And she was just, absolutely amazed with the solar system. And so I made sure in my weight room that I had like solar system stickers in my treasure box, which is what the children get to pick from at the end of a session. And I had solar system books on the shelf, the reading library for when the child is waiting to come in. And one day she came in with a My Little Pony. And when she came into my office, I said, "Oh, I had no idea you liked horses. Had I known you'd like horses, I would have had horse stickers in the treasure box, or I would have had horse books on the library shelf." And she very nonchalantly replied to me, "I'm not really interested in horses, Dr. Roberts. It's just that if I don't pretend to like horses and My Little Ponies in particular, I have no one to play with at recess time. That's what all the other girls are playing with." So there's this kind of, dissonance for children in that they've got ideas and curiosity and wonders that their typical peer may not have. And so they can feel like a sense of isolation. So in terms of like sharing a gifted diagnosis with a child, I have a little bit of sort of thought about that. And that is, I try not to use diagnostic terms with children until they're in middle school. Any diagnostic term, so whether it's giftedness or learning disability or, whatever, because before middle school, children can inadvertently compromise their own privacy. You know, they could blurt out in class, oh, I'm gifted, or, you know, I have ADHD or something, because they don't have the capacity to regulate. They don't have the self-control, they don't have the judgment or the reasoning yet, to be able to understand what that, you know, what that would do or how that would affect them, potentially affect them socially. I've got Arthur here desperately wanting to be a part of this video. Arthur, you sit down, please. I have had, you know, little children who, you know, they get wonderful report card grades, and they come home and their parents are gushing about how wonderful their report card grades are. You know, their report card is stuck to the fridge. When grandma comes over, grandma's shown the report card, you know, and that little child thinks, okay, I did great on that report card. People are happy with me. And then they go to school and on the playground say, I got all A's on my report card, you know, and that doesn't necessarily go over well with the other children. And so there's a kind of a misalignment there of sort of a social skill, right? A social intelligence. So sometimes what I do is I refer to Hermione in the first Harry Potter, you know, where Hermione was brilliant and she was telling everybody how to hold their wand and how to do their spell correctly, you know, and she wasn't really well liked at first. So other children don't really like, you know, knowing that they're less than you, right? Like, yeah, other children aren't particularly excited that that another child got great marks on their report card. So learning how to teach emotional intelligence and discernment to children is very important. And I would not use diagnostic terms until children are like in middle school. That's just sort of like a typical, you know, obvious thing. I have collected a whole bunch of different resources on giftedness that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to give you a link to the MindKey site where we keep a lot of gifted resources that you're welcome to access. My hope is that you'll find some of that to be of use and interesting. What I typically tell children is that everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and you have many gorgeous strengths. You have a gorgeous mind. You're able to think about problems and solve problems in a way that is difficult for other people, you know, and my greatest hope for you is that you grow up helping to solve some of the greatest problems that our world has, because your brain is a problem-solving brain. And I, to be honest, I'm a little bit metaphysical about this. So, you know, when we think about nature, like if there's a tree and a tree is cut, the tree will produce sap. You know, sap is designed to heal the tree. Nature is designed to survive. Nature is designed to grow and survive and continue. And there's evolutionary processes amongst all organisms. There's a part of me, and again, this is not based on like literature, this is just based on my own observation. There's a part of me that wonders if the human race is in an evolutionary process and we're producing Elon Musks and, you know, different problem solvers because we've created some really big problems that need to be solved, like climate change. So when I'm working with children, I like to position them as problem solvers. So rather than use the term gifted, I would be saying you are a good problem solver. One of the first books that I wrote in the World Around Us series, I wrote with Jamie Cassatt, who at the time was the chief educational evangelist for Google in the States. And he was, or he is best known for a quote, which is, don't ask children what they want to be when they grow up. Ask them what problem they want to solve. and I've always thought that there was a great deal of wisdom in that quote. And that is how I try to position like a gifted diagnosis to children, is that you have the capacity to make a difference in this world because you can solve problems that potentially other people would not be able to solve. And so, stay in school as long as you possibly can, follow your passions, be curious, you know, look up things you're curious about, seek out mentors, people in the areas that you are passionate about that could answer some of the more complex questions that you have. Gifted kids very quickly, surpass everybody around them, like even their parents, like they can't answer their questions. And so I think mentorship, like helping a gifted child connect with like a postdoc or something in physics or whatever, can be really, really useful. That's something I've spent a lot of time doing, is trying to make those connections. I actually had a lovely mentorship once that I was able to do, and I'm still kind of floored at my ability to do this. And at the time, I was reading The Discovery of Witches, which is this sort of fantasy novel set at Oxford University. And I've been lucky, very lucky, because I've twice been invited to the Oxford Roundtable. So I've gone to Oxford and been in these beautiful environments. But I had a little girl, not so little actually, she was like an adolescent, and she desperately wanted to learn about library systems, and she was interested in archival work and library systems. She was highly gifted, but gifted in a way that was really kind of around organizing knowledge, like that's what her passion was. Well, at Oxford, there's the Bodleian Library, which is a famous library. And I reached out to the head librarian and said, I've got this student, and, is there anybody on your team that could Zoom with her once in a while? And someone did, a junior librarian did spend a few times Zooming with this child, talking about the library and how things are organized, and, the different areas of, kind of rare manuscripts and how they're dealt with white gloves, through to electronic data storage. And it was a wonderful, wonderful example of how we can use mentorship to be helpful for children. Inquiry-based learning is good for everybody. Okay, so inquiry-based learning is, I think, where we're going as a field of education, is making sure that we're teaching things that are relevant to the child and driven by their own curiosities. So finding out what children are passionate about, and then constructing projects that help them answer their question, but also hit the prescribed learning outcomes. I've been able a few times in my career to go to private schools for the gifted and talented, and almost all of them have like an inquiry-based approach. Like that's how it's done, that kids are working on their own thing. But I think all children could benefit from some element of inquiry-based study. So I think it helps to create that sort of intrinsic motivation, that intrinsic desire to learn and to know and to be curious about. So I think it's a good model for all children, but it's especially a good model for children who are gifted, because they're prone to being bored, like they're sitting in a classroom often being taught something that they already knew, right? And so when you think about that zone of proximal development by Vygotsky, like they're way beyond that zone of everybody else. And so helping them find a way to stay engaged and curious is really, really important. Helping them learn how to discern, how to talk about their strengths with other children, I think is very important. Helping them see themselves as problem solvers, I think is very important. Understanding the social challenges and the anxiety that can come along with a gifted diagnosis, I think is very important. I think, let me go back to the questions that you had. Yeah, self-regulation, I think for me, when I think about self-regulation for children, it's kind of like, don't brag, like, be careful about what you say and how you describe yourself, because you could inadvertently push other children away, and you're already at risk of struggling to create relationships with other children because of the difference in understanding and curiosity, like the challenges of finding a kindred spirit. So self-regulation for me really is helping children who are gifted and talented learn how to, express themselves, show up in a group situation in a way that is tactful. And that's not always easy for them. And they get contrary messages, they get super praised at home and in certain environments, but then on the playground, they get the absolute opposite kind of feedback from peers. And so being mindful that even though some children are gifted, they don't have the emotional maturity, the social skills that take for us a lifetime to develop. It is so extraordinary being able to work with children who are gifted. It's like fascinating. I remember one time at the very, very beginning of being a school psychologist, I think it was actually during my internship when I was at the University of Toronto, and I was administering a cognitive measure, the WISC, and I hadn't administered it very many times. And so like the WISC is fiddly. There's all these little fiddly components. Now much of it is done on an iPad, but back then there were these fiddly little components. And so, there was this lag, so it would take me time to set everything up just right. And the table that I was at with this child was set up against the wall, and on the wall was a blackboard and there was chalk. So the child started to doodle on the chalkboard in between me setting up and taking away the different subtests, setting up the new subtests, taking it away. Like I wasn't efficient and was conscientious, and it was slow going, basically for the child. So, and when you're gifted, basically you test on and on and on and on. So those of you that choose to do a master's in special ed will learn about level B testing and level C testing. And basically a child who's gifted and talented, it takes forever to test them, because, you continue asking them questions until they don't know anything anymore, until they ceiling out. And for a lot of children, like that means administering the entire test. Whereas for a typical children, you stop a certain subtest after you've hit 3 or 4 questions incorrectly in a row. So it's tedious. It can be tedious assessment for both the child and the test administrator, just given the length of time that is needed to perform an assessment. So anyway, I was at the beginning of my career, and I was assessing this brilliant boy, and he was doodling on the blackboard, and I was doing my best to administer the test properly. And then I said goodbye to him and gave him like a little treat. I'm big on giving children treats. And I went to go clean up my WISC set kit at the time. And on the blackboard where he was doodling, he had drawn a tall ship, like a tall ship from the Napoleonic Wars, with all of the rigging and all of the sails and all of the cannons. And like, I was astounded that like, he would doodle a bit and I would do a little bit of work with him, and then he would doodle a bit more, and he created like an incredible, like, tall ship, like from the 1800s. I was dumbfounded. I was absolutely dumbfounded that he had that ability to do that so casually in those little moments in between. So working with gifted children can be extraordinarily enjoyable. it's challenging because it forces you to keep one step ahead, you know, which is not always easy when you have precocious children. But it's super rewarding. And I think that their needs are special. So even though they may not be struggling in many ways in a very negative way, okay, so you know, often children who are gifted are not prioritized for support or service because they're not seen to be struggling. It's important to recognize that they do in fact struggle in different ways though, and that, you know, they likely, in my opinion at least, you know, they're kind of like the sap of the human race. You know, they come to be problem solvers, and we need to nurture them so that they can apply their gifts at the right time to help the world around us. So a couple of things. We don't want children just simply to race through the curriculum. Just advancing kids, like skipping grades, you know, isn't best practice, because imagine, you know, you're already potentially socially awkward and you find yourself at university at 15 or 16, and, you know, you can't have a typical experience with other peers because you're so young. That can be even more isolating for a child. Also, we don't want them just to do more of the same work, right? Like, you know, if every child is doing 50 multiplication questions, we get them to do 500 because, you know, we want them to sit for the same length of time as everybody else. Like, that's not best practice. What we want them to do is exercise those higher level reasoning skills. So when we think of Bloom's taxonomy, those higher level reasoning skills around synthesis and analysis and application. I think some of you know that I write for news outlets. I write for Today's Parent, and I'm currently working on a manuscript around enrichment. Has not yet been published, but I'm going to share it with you, the rough draft of it with you in the comments, as well as some resources for you to access. So I hope that answers your 3 questions around gifted pedagogy. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Once I was able to do a directed study in advanced gifted pedagogy, which was like teaching master's students specifically how to work with children who were gifted and talented. And it was one of my most rewarding experiences, being able to teach, particularly in that area. Because I've seen a whole bunch of children with just absolutely gorgeous brains over the years, and they need to be nurtured. They need to belong. They need to be emotionally validated. They need to have a sense of protection against their heart from the world that could cut them to the quick. They need extra support in learning emotional intelligence and social skills, and you know, and they need to have their curiosity fueled, and they need inspiration, and they need mentorship. These are things that are very important. And I hope as you as teachers can take some of these ideas and apply them to your own practice. Okay, well, that's a little discussion forum answer around giftedness. And I will make the next one as soon as I can. Okay, bye-bye.